If you've ever wondered whether you should be investing in mutual funds, ETFs, or individual stocks, but had no idea what the difference is or which one's actually best, you are not alone. Most people are putting their money into investments they don't fully understand, and that confusion, it can lead to missed gains, higher fees, and way more risk than you signed up for. In today's episode, we're breaking it all down in plain old English: what mutual funds, ETFs, and stocks actually are, how they work, how they differ, and the pros and cons of each. Whether you're investing through your 401k, using a brokerage app, or just trying to figure out where to start, by the end of this episode, you'll know exactly which option fits your money goals and how to avoid the rookie mistakes that cost people thousands. Let's get into it.
Sugar Daddy Podcast, yo. Learn how to make them pockets grow. Financial freedom's where we go. Smart investments, money flow.
Hey, babe, what are we talking about today?
Today, we are talking about mutual funds versus ETFs versus individual stocks, what it means, because people throw it around like rice on the internets, on these internet streets, and most people don't know what they are, what the differences are, the benefits, pros, cons, etc. So let's break it down for them.
Yeah, I'm about to say it's a little bit hard because there is some overlap in regards to similarities between them, but then there are also some very key differences. And just like a lot of stuff when it comes to financial literacy, we're not taught about it in school, we're not taught about it in college, and really we have to just kind of figure it out on our own. So the idea here is that we're providing with some information to help, shorten that process from a learning standpoint as far as understanding the differences and maybe help you figure out what's best for you.
Okay. Where do you want to start?
Well, first, we want to start out as far as defining each of these terms.
Okay.
All right. So, first, we're going to start out with mutual funds. All right. A mutual fund is a professionally managed pool of money. And what it is that you have someone who's the fund manager who actually is picking the various investments within that mutual fund pool of money.
Okay.
Now, you probably are somewhat familiar with mutual funds because if you have some type of employer retirement plan, such as the 401k or 403b, the funds that you're investing in there are often mutual funds.
Okay.
All right.
Yep.
Any questions about that?
Nope.
All right. So moving on to the next one, as far as a high level definition, is ETFs. And ETFs stand for exchange traded funds. All right. Now, there are some similarities between like an ETF and a mutual fund in the sense of it is a pool of it's a pool of individual investments. However, there are some, very distinct differences. So with a ETF, it actually trades like a stock. Now, what I mean by that is that when you're purchasing a mutual fund, you're not exactly sure how much you're purchasing for until the close of the stock market that day. So, stock market opens up 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and if I was to buy a mutual fund, invest in a mutual fund at 10 a.m., it doesn't actually show me what I purchased it for until it closes at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
That's really weird. So it's like a surprise.
You
Here's
have
what
an idea,
paid.
like you have an idea. So like you have an idea. And also the pricing of mutual funds doesn't fluctuate the same way.
Okay.
So, with a stock, the price fluctuates from like second to second.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with an ETF because it trades the same way as a stock. Now, the difference with the ETF, because we said it is a pool of, funds, a pool of funds.
Mm-hmm.
The difference is that it's often what's called passively managed.
Okay.
So it does have a fund manager, but the manager is not making all these different changes and choosing all the different individual investments within it the same way that the investments are being picked within a mutual fund. So mutual funds are often what's called actively managed. The manager is making a lot of changes on a regular basis as compared to with an ETF. They are not making the same changes. They are more passively allowing things to, they've made the investments and allow them to do what they need to do. Now, with the ETFs, ones that most people are kind of familiar with is like an index ETF.
Mm-hmm.
So what it is it's an ETF that mirrors, say, the S&P 500. So you're picking the same investments that are within the S&P 500, so you're not making those same changes.
Okay. I'm probably skipping ahead here, but when I hear actively managed versus passively managed, I'm thinking fees and what I'm paying.
You are 100% on the right thought process.
Okay. So I would likely be paying more on something that's actively managed like the mutual fund versus something that is passively managed like the ETFs index funds.
Correct. That is one
Ooh.
of the key differences between the mutual fund and an ETF is that often mutual funds have higher expenses than the ETFs do.
Okay. What's next?
All right, so moving into the individual stock, the sexy stuff that a lot of people think about when it comes to investing. All right.
Hmm.
So, individual stock is actual ownership in an individual company. So, for example, if you're buying a stock in Apple or Microsoft or the hot one,
Tesla.
Nvidia,
Oh, yeah.
you are
Missed
buying,
that boat.
yeah, you are buying essentially, you are buying a portion of ownership in that company. Now, it does have some benefits, but also has, some drawbacks where you can have, high upside in regards to how much it can grow. But with that also comes a much higher risk
Hmm.
because you are not as diversified as compared to with like an ETF and a mutual fund. You're investing in a pool of investments as compared to a stock. It's one company.
Yeah. I like to think of like the ETFs is you have the fruit basket, right, with all the different fruits. But if you're buying an individual stock, you're just buying the apple, you're just buying the banana, you're
Yes.
just buying the kiwi.
That is an excellent analogy.
I like
Because
to give people visuals.
because like with the stocks, it's a lot more. So like with the ETFs and mutual funds, it could be a lot more hands off for you as the individual investor as compared to with individual stocks. It does require more involvement and more research on your part.
Right.
Now, an additional analogy is, between the three of them is that you could think of like a mutual fund as like a buffet with a chef. All
Mm,
right.
mm-hmm.
So you have the buffet, but then you have the chef there that's kind of, divvying everything out.
Mm-hmm. He
The-
picked the menu.
yes. And with the ETF, you can have a it's more like a prepackaged meal plan.
Okay.
All right. So
Mm-hmm.
you get what you get. It's put together, but you get what you get. You don't necessarily have the options of choosing all these various things. It's already prepackaged for you.
And you don't throw a fit.
Correct. And now, when it comes to the stock,
Um,
you're cooking from scratch.
mm-hmm.
You have to go and buy all the individual ingredients and you have to cook it and put it all together yourself.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I like that.
All right.
Which I would say with the individual stock, because it requires that research. What are you researching? Right? Like that's where it gets tricky because like most people aren't in finance and don't understand what they should even be looking for to say this could potentially maybe one day be a good investment.
So when it comes to researching individual stocks, there are a variety of ways to do that analysis.
Mhm.
Now, this episode is not going to go deep into that, but there are a variety of ways to do it. And one way is not correct and one way is not necessarily wrong. It also comes down to personal preference as well when it comes to how you're going to evaluate it and what
Mhm.
specifically details you're going to actually look at.
Okay. Okay.
You could talk to three different, uh, certified financial analysts, and they might give you three completely different ways of the way that they go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
take that with a certain grain of salt that if it's something that you want to do, that's fine, but you are going to have to put that time into doing it. And
Mhm.
also, continuous because it's not just a one-time thing.
Right. What do you say to clients who may be locked in on a stock early and they're like very loyal and but they're all in on that one stock? What do you say to them?
Well, the biggest thing that you want to also make sure that you're focused on is the diversification because by diversifying, you also help to mitigate risk. If you have all your money from an investment standpoint into one individual stock, as compared to having a portfolio constructed of mutual funds or ETFs, you have significantly higher risk often within that one individual stock because if that one individual stock doesn't perform well, the entire portfolio is shot as compared to with the ETF and the mutual funds. If some of the investments in there don't perform well, you have a bunch of other ones to counter that hopefully.
Right.
But the way that you would look at it is that if also it depends on what account you're holding that individual stock in. Because for example, if you have an IRA and you have individual stocks within your IRA, since it is a tax qualified account, you can actually, if you have, say, all your money in Apple, you can actually sell off some of that and not have a tax consequence within your IRA
Oh,
because
nice.
it's a qualified account. The
Okay.
tax implication doesn't come into you actually withdraw funds
Okay.
as compared to if you have a brokerage account, which means that it's not a tax qualified account. If you have all the Apple in there, if you were to sell off, that is a taxable event. So therefore, the way
Mm.
that you might want to counter that instead, like if you're highly concentrated in that one stock, instead of selling off that stock, what you might want to do is any new contributions that you're putting into that account, you are contributing to other investment options and no longer purchasing Apple.
Okay, I feel like you just said a whole bunch of stuff because what I'm hearing is it's not only important where like what you're buying, but where you're buying it.
Yes,
Okay. Okay.
because as we stated, different accounts have different tax implications on the movement that you make within them.
Right. Ooh, do y'all see why people hire financial planners? Because there's so much nuance.
Yeah, and the thing is that, if you're a type of person that's going to dedicate the time to understanding this, everyone can everyone can understand this if they had dedicated the time. It's
Right.
a matter of, do you have the time? Do you want to make the time? Do you want to do that? That's what it boils down to.
Yeah. Okay. What else do you want the people to know?
Well, we kind of touched on it as far as the difference between the active and passive management.
Mm-hmm.
Because with the active aspect, you're having that human manager of the fund that is actually going to be picking and making changes within that say mutual fund.
Okay.
But like I said, that does come with a higher fee. And one of the biggest things that I find that like people don't pay attention to is the fees associated with the different investments that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now, an individual stock doesn't necessarily have a fee associated with being in it, but when you buy and sell, you could have implications from a tax standpoint as far as long term versus short term tax.
Okay.
But when you're choosing mutual funds and ETFs, there is something called an expense ratio. An expense ratio is a fancy word for how much you are paying to be invested in that fund.
Okay.
Passive investing. There are some mutual funds that do passive investing, but passive investing is mostly with ETFs, exchange traded funds, and the fees tend to be lower on there.
Okay.
All right, as compared to with your mutual fund,
They're higher.
it's going to be higher.
Okay.
And the reason you want to pay attention to that is because at the end of the day, it's a matter of what you keep from a growth standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
So you can have all this growth, but if all this growth is in funds that have higher fees, that's going to cut into the growth that you have.
Yeah. Can we talk about how these accounts grow? Because I know we always talk about compound interest, and compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. And then online, you see things where it's like, I went on this vacation to Bali and I used the payment from my dividends. Like, what does that stuff mean?
All right, so dividends are great. But when you're hearing it in that standpoint, that means that person has a lot invested
Yeah.
in that specific stock or, fund or whatever it may be
Mm-hmm.
in order to have the dividends. Because a dividend is simply a percentage payout based upon the, performance or growth or success that the fund or individual stock has had for that year.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a percentage. So for example, if I only have $100 invested in there and the percentage is 5% of
Mm-hmm.
for the dividend, all I got was $5.
You are not going to Bali for that.
Yeah. So when you hear people say that they're living off of dividends or that they're using them for, very expensive purchases, they have a lot invested already.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not, I don't want people to have a misconception that, oh, I have like $100,000 invested in the market and I'm going to be living off of my dividends, like
Right.
living lavish. That's not the reality. These people are living off of this. They have substantial amount of money invested.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they're able to live off those dividends because
Yeah.
they already have a lot of money to begin with.
Is that what the people like in the FIRE movement are doing? A lot of times living off of their dividends?
I mean, it depends. It really
Okay.
depends on it depends on how old they are, how their portfolio is
Okay.
structured.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just say it really depends, to be honest with you.
Okay. When you say something is actively managed and passively managed, these are not people that you're actually interacting with.
No, not at all. These are
Okay.
the fund managers.
Yeah.
So an ETF,
They're in the background.
yeah,
You will not see them. You don't know who they are.
because you have someone that is overlooking the fund and making sure that it's doing what it's quote unquote trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the big thing here, difference between the active and the active and passive, is that often with an actively managed fund, they're actually trying to beat the market in a sense with that fund.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, like if it's an aggressive mutual fund, they're trying to beat the market.
Mm-hmm.
They're not trying to.
I mean, isn't
that's the
everybody
goal.
trying to
That's-
beat the market?
No, not everyone,
No?
because you
Okay.
also have passively managed funds,
Okay.
and their goal is to try to do maybe just as well as the market. So, for example, if S&P 500 index fund is not trying to beat the market,
Oh, okay.
it is simply trying to do it does the same that the S&P 500 does.
Okay. Okay.
So that's could be a huge difference.
And just to be clear, because I think S&P 500 is something that if you're trying to educate yourself on the internet about investing, you see that a lot. And the S&P 500
Since for
is
Standard and Poor's, and it is one of the most widely used indexes to measure the performance of the overall stock market. And what it is 500 of the largest U.S. stocks.
yeah. So again, you're getting that diversified,
Yeah. And it
bag.
changes too because
Hmm.
if number 501 overtakes number 500,
Right.
then it moves in.
Then it moves in. Yeah. So you always
So there could
have.
be some, switching around the positions or,
Hmm.
new ones coming in and the lower ones being dropped out.
Yeah. Okay. Um. Okay. So I feel like you said a lot. We've got our visuals. We've got our private chef. We've got our home cooked meals. Like we got our fruit
Yeah,
basket.
and
Like.
kind of like a little way to like give you a little overview of kind of what we just talked about.
Okay.
You could think of like the mutual funds; they're great for your retirement funds. All right, they're great for retirement stuff like that. But you do obviously need to keep an eye on the fees associated with it because they tend to be a little bit higher.
Okay. And
Now,
what
they're
do you
also,
mean
but
when you say
however,
high fees? Like what are we looking at?
so in some mutual funds may be pushing 0.6% to 1%.
Okay.
What that means is 1%. So if you have $100 in there, 1% of that is $1.
Okay. That's what you're going to be paying. So for
Yes.
every $100 that you make, you're going to be putting a dollar. You're going to be paying a dollar to have that
Yeah.
fund.
Now, there has
Mhm.
been a move towards mutual funds trying to compete with ETFs. So there has been a move to lowering the fees on that. But
Mhm.
the whole premise of this is that we want you to be aware this is one aspect of your investment portfolio that you need to keep an eye on. What are the fees that you are paying to be invested in the various funds that you have?
Yes. Okay.
Now, with the ETFs, that's more like honestly, that's more like more of a modern thing. As far as for the modern investor, people around our age, has a similar aspect from an ease standpoint and a diversification standpoint as a mutual fund.
Mhm.
Big difference is that not necessarily actively managed, so therefore the fees are lower.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, uh, if some people like again, the internet will have you believe that everything that has a higher fee is bad,
No,
but that's not the
it's an
case.
analysis. It's
Yeah.
based upon what is the growth that you're getting on that
Mhm.
in comparison to the fee that you're paying.
Right.
Because if you're paying a higher fee on a mutual fund in comparison to a similar ETF, but you're getting a better performance on that mutual fund, that
Mhm.
higher fee may be justified. You simply have to do the math on that.
Right. Right. Okay.
And then you have obviously the stocks. That's the fun and flashy stuff that can have the high risk, high rewards.
Mhm.
But they can also, you got to be more hands on with that to pay attention to it.
I don't want to be hands-on.
Yeah,
I
which
don't
I
have
would,
time. I don't
yeah,
have energy. I don't want to.
which I would say, with people that are investing in individual stocks heavily,
Mhm.
because I think it's fine to have a small portion of your portfolio in individual stocks. But if you have an overwhelming percentage of your portfolio in individual stocks, I really think you need to be a hands-on person if you're doing this yourself, if you're not paying somebody else to do it. And
Mhm.
honestly, if you're going to be paying somebody else to do it, it's a very specific individual from an advisor standpoint, because most financial advisors don't want to be picking stocks for people.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about because this is still a lot of information, and even though I feel like we're breaking it down in a easier to understand manner, let's apply this to like real life. So our audience are millennials, 35 to 44, give or take. I'm sure there's some outliers. Let's say you have a 25-year-old. What would you I know it depends. That's Brandon's favorite. It depends. But if you're a regular 25-year-old, you're working your first 401, your first W-2 job, you're making decent money, and you want to start investing, where would you tell them to start?
I mean, honestly, within your 401k plan, you're limited. So we're going to go outside of that.
Okay.
Um, these are going to be your low cost ETFs.
Okay.
And in all honesty, for for a beginner investor, it is perfectly fine to use the robo-advisor because it's going to help with some of that knowledge standpoint. And it's also going to take some of the things off your plate as far as from a picking standpoint. It's going to ask you a variety of questions to help them understand, who you are as an investor, and then it's going to spit out a portfolio that works for you, of low cost ETFs.
Yeah. So it's going to have like your target date fund stuff, your risk tolerance, which at 25 you can be pretty aggressive.
Yeah.
We actually have an entire episode on like robo-advisors
Yeah.
versus traditional financial
And
advisors
what it
and
boils down to is like, what are you looking to get out of
mhm,
the medium that you're using?
right.
And for a beginner, and you're just getting started, you want to obviously be very conscious of how much you're spending.
Mhm.
And a robo advisor is, you have to pay for robo advisors,
Mhm.
but it's going to be a lower cost point than working with a
A
person.
traditional
Yeah.
advisor. Yeah. Okay. What about people that are like us, 40s, family, you know,
You-
trying to think about retirement?
You're going to obviously have your mutual funds in your 401k plan, but then also, too, you can utilize the ETFs for ease and flexibility.
Okay. Where do I buy those?
You could buy those in any brokerage account. If you have an IRA at, Charles Schwab, at Fidelity,
Okay.
whatever it may be, even, the Robinhood, even though I'm not a big fan of
Ooh,
Robinhood, but
I'm surprised you
what I'm
said
saying
that.
is that you can buy
Okay.
ETFs on there.
Okay. So if I have an IRA, I can buy ETFs in that IRA.
Yeah.
Okay. What about a Roth IRA? Same
It's
thing?
Roth IRA is just a designation of how the money is,
Text.
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's the same. You have the same options.
Okay. Cool. Um, what if I am like early 30s? I've been investing. I understand the power of time and compound interest. I'm not a beginner. I'm not
Mhm.
totally green. What would you advise for somebody who's a little bit more experienced and maybe wants to do a little bit more?
I still think on the individual side, as far as like brokerage, like an IRA brokerage account, I still think there's a big benefit to having the core portion of your portfolio in ETFs.
Okay.
One, it's going to give you that diversification at a lower cost point.
Mhm.
Because if you're thinking about trying to buy individual stocks in order to diversify your portfolio, you're going to have a lot more money in order to be able to do that because an individual stock's going to cost more.
Mhm.
And so, therefore, like I said, it's going to cost more to get that diversification that you need. So, with a core portfolio of ETFs, you can manage your fees and have the diversification at a lower cost point.
Okay.
Now, I think it's perfectly fine if you are the type of person where you're going to take the time to be hands on and understand investing in individual stocks. Because, like I said, with an individual stock comes more risk. So, you are going to have to take the time to research and understand, the risk versus rewards of doing that. It's perfectly fine to do it if you put in the work to understand what it is you're doing.
Yeah. Do you have any tips or advice if people are like, I do want to buy some individual stocks, but I don't know how to actually research?
Well, one of the tips I give people is that, like, obviously you could think of like the common ones that we know of, like Apple and Nvidia, the ones that you see in the news that are doing
Yeah.
well. You can obviously, those are kind of easy ones to target. I kind of tell people that maybe look at where you're spending your money, or specifically whatever sector your career is in. What do you see there?
That's a good one. Well, because I've even said to you, like if you open up our cupboard, if you look at our desk right now, we have a lot of Yeti products. I like Yeti, but
Now, I
and
will
I've
preface that sometimes a good product doesn't necessarily make a good stock.
that's what I'm saying. So if you're saying, "Hey, well, I already shop here. I have a lot of this. This is a brand that I really like." Okay, I said, "Hey, should we invest in Yeti?" And you were like, "No, historically they have not done well." What did you look at to see that? Did you look at like their 10K? What did you
Well, I'm not going to go into that's. I think that could be a completely separate episode
Okay.
to go into those details, because that's going to be more of an episode focused on how do you evaluate a stock.
Okay.
And I think that majority of people, like our listening core, I don't
Mhm.
think that's where your time should be allocated, to be honest with you.
Okay. All right. All right. So then let's pivot into
But if you are going to invest in individual stocks, I think from a knowledge standpoint, it's easier to start in areas that you know. So, for example, if
mhm.
you work in healthcare, what are you seeing within healthcare on a day to day basis that may be, hey, maybe I should look into this? Like, for example, if you worked at several different hospitals, or you are overseeing several different hospitals, like what softwares are you guys using within that hospital?
Mhm.
Maybe that might be a good place to start your research to see if it makes sense to invest.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, like all the hospitals going to electronic records using Epic or something like that. It's like, I don't know
Yeah,
if they're public or
because
not, but
because there's tons of, like,
yeah.
because like, obviously, we hear about the sexy ones always, like, Apple, Microsoft, Google,
Yeah, yeah.
all those,
All the ones laying off 40,000 employees every single year. Yeah, mhm.
but there's
Got it.
also plenty of other stocks out there that are having significant growth. They're just not as commonly known.
Mhm.
So therefore, if you, like I said, you working in your industry, it's an industry that I don't work in, so I wouldn't even be aware of these little, smaller things that actually can have significant growth. Because
Right.
also, it's not a matter of like how much the stock cost. Like if you're looking to buy like a higher price stock, you're looking at the difference between
Potential
what
for
you bought it at and
yeah.
what it grows to.
Right, right.
So like even if the stock is only $5 now, but at the end of the year it had a 15% growth on it,
Yeah,
20% growth on it.
that's
That's
significant.
yeah, as compared to like, oh, I'm gonna buy a stock that costs $200.
Right.
It's the margin you're looking for of growth.
Okay. So, if we're thinking about where do I start? Which one makes sense for me? What questions can people ask themselves to decide? Should I do a mutual fund? Should I do an ETF? Am I right to be picking my own individual stocks? What do you think?
Well, you definitely first. So I always look at it this way: where do people normally start their investment journey? And most people start their investment journey at their first job, investing in their 401k plan.
Yeah.
And within your 401k plan, that is often going to be a mutual fund. So
Okay.
that's going to be your first place to start because that's the easiest entry point.
And let me sidebar, we have an entire episode on how to properly set up your 401k because most people they enroll, they don't know what they're doing, they're not optimizing anything, maybe they're not changing their time horizon, their target dates, they're not actually changing the investments of what you can invest in. You're not doing like pre-tax, Roth, after tax. Those are three different things. We have an entire episode on just 401ks. So we'll link that one in the show notes. But so that's important here when we're thinking about the mutual funds.
Yes, that's going to be your probably most people's initial entry point is taking a look at your 401k plan and seeing what investment options you have available to you, or your 401k plan or a 403b, whatever it may be, what investment options you have available to you in there.
Yeah.
And like I said, that's mostly going to be mutual funds, and that can help you understand by doing doing a little bit of research on your retirement account to see what those different mutual funds are and what they entail.
Okay. Awesome.
Now, once you kind of move past, I've already, been contributing to my employer retirement account, and now maybe I want to take the next step and do some investing elsewhere, whether that's an IRA or a brokerage account. That's going to be, hey, looking at ETFs
Okay.
because it's going to be similar aspect, like I said, to the mutual fund as far as being able to diversify for a lower cost point. But with the ETF, it is going to be more passively managed, so therefore it's going to have even lower fee.
Okay. And then
With the stocks,
yeah.
like I said, I always caution people about this
Mhm.
because I have honestly, there's very few people I've seen that have done this on their own and end up doing well.
Mhm. Well,
Becau-
and I mean, all the research shows that like picking individual stocks does not typically yield a better return than picking something like an S&P 500.
yeah, and the hard part is too is that you also have to take into account human behavior.
Mm.
Do you have the fortitude to deal with the ups and downs? So you're going to see if you have investments in individual stocks, you're probably going to see more fluctuation in those individual stocks because you have high reward, but you also have a higher risk. So you want to make sure that you're not buying into a stock, you see it drop, and then you want to go ahead and immediately sell it. You got
Mm.
to really think about why did I, purchase this individual stock? Do I believe in it? And you have to give it the time that it needs in order to see the return that you're hopefully looking to see.
Yeah.
Because what ends up happening is that, and this is just like an investment standpoint, investing principle in general, not just
Mhm.
simply with stocks. Too many people cannot handle the ups and downs. So they'll go ahead and, be invested, but then they see the market dip. They get hysterical about losing money. They pull their money out. And what ends up happening, the market goes back up, but their money's not back in the market to go up.
Yeah. So then they miss the boom
Yes.
because of emotional panic.
Yeah. So a big part
Yeah.
of it is having, regardless of what you're investing in, you have to one, understand what you're investing in, understand the time horizon that you're investing, and then understand from a behavioral standpoint of what you should and should not do.
And who you are as a person.
Yes,
Yeah.
who you are as a
Can
person.
can you handle the fluctuation
Yeah.
and ride the wave, so
And
to
that
speak?
and the thing is too is that the behavioral aspect doesn't even have to do with anything from an intelligence standpoint.
Yeah, yeah.
I have extremely intelligent clients where I already know when certain things happen,
You gotta give them a
I'm
call.
have to be proactive and say, "Hey, this is what remember we talked about this. We knew this is a possibility," and go through all that to talk them off the cliff. And I know that, and that, like I said, that has nothing to do with their intelligence because they're extremely intelligent people.
Mhm.
This is simply human emotion when
Mhm.
it comes to your own money.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, I mean, would you say that maybe having a mix of the mutual funds and ETFs, or maybe a mix of all three, is the best way to kind of find balance in all of
I'm not
this?
going to say it's the best way to find balance because that's all going to depending on,
Okay. It
your individual
depends.
goal.
It
Well, it does. It depends on
depends.
your individual goals and what you are going to do. Because, like I said, if you have stocks in there, you're going to have to be a little bit more hands on.
Okay.
So, if your goal is to be as hands off as possible,
Yeah.
individual stocks is not the way to go.
Right.
So, it really depends on from individual as far as what's going to be the best for that person.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I think this was very helpful. Is there anything else that we missed or that you want to make sure we cover?
I think for what we were focused on,
Mm-hmm.
I think we hit all the key points that I want to talk about because obviously there's so many different things in investing that we could address, but we do want to kind of stay focused to kind of the high level overview of the ETFs, mutual funds, and stocks.
Okay, perfect. Well, we hope that this was helpful. We hope that the visuals that we gave you about the chef and the fruit basket and all of those things help you understand what you're actually getting yourself into when you purchase these investments, because you do have to purchase them, and what the pros and the cons are, and the risks, because investing is risk. There's no such thing as a sure thing. So, if this was helpful, share it with a friend, and we will talk to you soon.
Sugar Daddy Podcast, yo. Learn how to make them pockets grow.